And we are back for another round review here on Off the Ruck. I'm John Ferguson, and it was another round which actually developed and actually became something really, really quite interesting, especially there later on this Saturday afternoon. And we're going to get all into all that. And before we get onto it, if you feel like you get any value from the channel, if you feel like you liking the takes and you're also liking the content you get throughout the week, please chuck me a subscribe and a like. That really helps me continue to grow the channel and to bring more rugby content to rugby lovers like you. Anyways, let's get straight into the weekend. We are going to start at the end of the weekend as opposed to at the start, which we normally start at. And we're going to go straight to Perth, where the Force and the Hurricanes played out the first draw of the Super Rugby Pacific season in 2025. It went to Super Point. There were 10 minutes extra, and no one could add the extras. Ben Donaldson had a chance. Ruben Love had a shot at a drop goal, and it skewed off, and that was the final play of the game. It hit the upright, the left upright, and it just went out. And that is exactly how close the margins were on Saturday night in Perth between the Force and the Hurricanes. I think some key talking points throughout this game was that the Western Force were really getting a big rub of the green from Damon Murphy, the referee, especially at scrum time. Tom Robinson, really got the upper hand on Xavier Numia, and Xavier Numia is touted to be an All Black sooner rather than later. And I just don't think that someone of his size, power, and quality would necessarily be dominated to the point where he leaks 4 penalties to someone like Tom Robinson. Although a very experienced Wallaby, he's got more than 30 caps under his belt, but nonetheless, he isn't the biggest prop, and that was just some of the dark arts really coming to the fore for Tom Robinson, which you have to pay respect and homage to, really. But on the other side, and you do have to appreciate that he really did get the good end of that stick in the scrumming debate, and Duplessis Karifi, one of the co-captains from the Hurricanes, was rightfully quite ticked off about some of those decisions. But nevertheless, the Western Force did a really good job with their kicking game. They said, no, we're not going to play anything in our own half, and we're just going to go play territory, play territory, play territory. And if we can get down there, we're going to back our maul, we're going to back our attack, and we're going to see how we go. The Western Force were really impressive in the way that they were able to do that. Excuse me. And I think that the Hurricanes were definitely the side that tired and got more bored of the kicking game quicker, where they probably exited too early, and they probably should have afforded to run, and they could have planned to have run a lot more. And that was the word from Clark Laidlaw, their coach, at halftime. They just said, if we hold the ball a little bit longer than as opposed to kicking it, we're going to get the right pictures. And so that's what they did in the second half. They definitely got more opportunities, and this was partially because of their powerful ball runners like Finiganofo on one wing, Pudivai on the other, as well as Umanga Jensen earlier in the first half before he went off, and Balin Sullivan. But the real story was Harkin, the fullback, was running some absolutely scything lines, as well as the return of Billy Proctor. He has a couple of All Blacks caps under his belt now from last year, and he really burst onto the scene last year after having some really consistent seasons in Super Rugby Pacific for the Hurricanes. He was extremely impressive, and he really got them back on the front foot, which allowed them just to look like they were being more dominant than they actually were. The Hurricanes were really unlucky at breakdown time as well, whilst the Force were doing a really good job to kind of weather the storm of the Hurricanes, especially coming out of that, out of half time. And they did a really good job at just being able to say, okay, well, now we've got to stick to our process and we've got to muscle up. And they did that. So really impressive from the Force. Obviously, a draw isn't what neither side wanted, but that's how the table looks. And I think that both sides now look at the next couple of weeks. The Brumbies go to New Zealand for a 2-week tour against the Chiefs and the Blues. I think in that order, in that order. And then the Hurricanes fly this week to Canberra to play the Brumbies next round. So both sides are in for a tough run, and it's going to be an extremely tight and interesting race to the final. Nevertheless, really well done to both teams, and I'm extremely impressed with the Western Force, because as an Australian side in seasons gone by, they would have fallen away in that game. But the rub of the green from the referee meant their systems and their muscles and their aggression really paid dividends a lot in the tight stuff. So congratulations, some good performances in the backline from the Western Force as well, but mainly their kicking and strategy game from the halves. And I thought Nick White was really good in the 60 minutes, the odd 60 minutes that he played. So well done to the Western Force. Now we'll take you back to Friday, and we'll continue to go chronologically, because that just feels like it makes the most sense. The Blues and the Hurricanes was an old-fashioned brawl fest. It was not particularly sexy. It was not an exciting game of rugby if you want to go back and watch that one, but go and watch it for the purists because the defense was tight. The attack was really impressive considering the absolute pouring rain, and it was blowing as well. So it forced players like Beauden Barrett off their game. He couldn't really get a handle on the game like he has in previous games in the first half, but he definitely grew into the performance, and he probably was the difference in being able to create a little bit of forward momentum for the Blues when they really needed it. But I think that the forward pack really rolled up their sleeves, but the Crusaders just took it to them, and the Blues just had no answer. The Crusaders' defense was staunch. They couldn't get through them, and when they got desperate, they kicked. And because Beauden Barrett wasn't quite kicking as well as he has previously, it just meant that in the conditions, they just couldn't get any necessary pay out of it. So the Crusaders, although it was a tight score, 25-22, the Crusaders definitely looked like the more comfortable, calm, and dominant side. A really impressive performance from returning Cody Taylor. The front row of Tamati Williams and Fletcher Newell was also really, really impressive. And I also thought that Tar Kemera and Noah Hotham had a pretty decent game at 9 and 10. Overall, the backs of the Blues did really well considering that their forwards were going backwards. I thought they were quite impressive. No star standout plays, but definitely quite a good performance behind a backwards pedaling pack. So congratulations to both sides. This really sets up the Blues to be in a difficult position for the rest of their season, while it really cements the Hurricanes as one of the top 2, if not 3 sides the Brumbies can continue on their tear. So very exciting for that, but nonetheless, good game from the two, and it's just wait to see how badly this loss will impact the Blues, because they did pick up a losing bonus point, but nonetheless, they're still sitting outside the top 6. Next, we have the Waratahs versus the Fiji and Drua in Fiji, and this game was as messy as it was frantic. It was just poor handling across the ball. The Waratahs were dealing with the conditions terribly, not particularly getting any sort of territory ascendancy or being able to get any consistent ball where they wanted to have it, and when they did, they dropped it, and it was just extremely messy and very poorly organized. It was not a good game of rugby to watch. Congratulations to Fiji, who've notched their second win. Wonga, their 6th, he's absolutely electric. I believe that he's been a sevens player, and you can see it in the way that he moves, because he makes 40, 50-meter breaks almost every game now when he started, and he is just awesome to watch. The forward pack for the Fiji and Drua definitely got the ascendancy in the physicality battle. It was quite hard to watch some of the tackling sequences from the forwards in the Tars, and they did actually, though, to their credit, lose Kylea, Gamble, and I believe it was Teddy Wilson very early, as well as another player, which I'm forgetting. So I think it was Ethan Dobbins, actually. Yeah, the hooker, Ethan Dobbins. So all of them, bar Teddy Wilson, didn't return. So it was quite a tumultuous half for first half for the Waratahs. And that really fed into this disorganization. Although all the players there were part of preseason, everyone should have known where they needed to stand and what they needed to do. And it just, in the conditions, and maybe because it was so slippery, because it was so sweaty and wet leading up into the week, it was quite wet underfoot. But also mainly just because it was so hot and sweaty that the ball just was like a bar of soap. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend going back and watching this game. It was also unentertaining from a lack of standard perspective, unlike the Crusaders and Blues game, which was a very high standard. Just no one could get the other upper hand on the other. So yeah, tough for the Waratahs. They really botched that at the end of it, where Kimo Valentini tried to kick for a to rid them of their losing bonus point by being within 7 points, and Tane Edmond catches it just before the dead ball line and passes it behind his dead ball line to Tristan Riley. He tries to run it out, and then they get a penalty try. It was just, and then that means that the Drua get their points, and so the Waratahs lose their bonus point anyway. So the Waratahs come away from Fiji with nothing. They could have come away with 1 bonus point, which definitely could have been vital leading into this final stanza of the season. It's the final third, actually. And it just kind of sometimes you just got to take the losses. Sometimes you just gotta accept that you got beaten on the day, and going away with something is better than going away with nothing. But they went for the Hail Mary, trying to get a draw and then possibly go into super time, but they got absolutely dished up, and Joseph Akusasuli got a yellow card. He played pretty well, but kept relatively silent considering. Very nice touch that he gave his boots to the opposite winger, Longanamasi, at the end of the game. It's more than just a game, and so for some of these Fijian Drua players, they're still playing with an NRL star that they have watched playing for the Roosters. So extremely cool moment, but nonetheless, the Waratahs need to sort out their roller coasting, yo-yoing form on the road, because they are a different side. They forget how to play overseas or when they're away from home, and then when they come home, they're really strong. So need to improve on that for sure. And the Drua, congratulations on your second win again. The next game was the Moana Pasifika hosting the ACT Brumbies in Pukekohe, and it looked to be a really, really tight game. For the first 40, it was dead even. It was so close. No one could gain the upper hand, and the Brumbies were actually under the pump for a lot of that first half because they lost Tom Hooper to a yellow card for repeated infringements for the side. So not just him, but just the whole team was getting pinged left, right, and center. And I'd like to go back and see the penalty count. Actually, I might just whip them up here. But it was just crazy at how staunch the defense from the Moana Pasifika side was, and vice versa, also how staunch the Brumbies defense was to keep them out because it seemed like they were camped in the Brumbies 22 for something like 8 minutes at a time sometimes, and they could just never get out of their half. And it was really frustrating because it was just penalty count. It was like they just never got any clean possession. But in the second half, the game drivers, Ryan Lonergan, Noel Olsia, really took the game by the scruff of their neck, got the team in the right parts of the field, trusted their set piece. Jipper, James Parsons from the Aotearoa Rugby Breakdown pod on Sky, and his commentary team on Sky were constantly saying, kick for goal, kick for goal, kick for goal. But the Brumbies backed them all every single time, and they scored. Billy Pollard got a double, eventually started getting more of a roll on momentum. That meant that Corey Toole got a double. They managed to find some space for him. So it was just one of those games where the patience of the Brumbies, the trust that they have in their systems, and also their ability to not be tilted by a play going against them, because they managed to get another yellow card as well. So 2 yellow cards, and so 20 minutes without 15 men on the field with 14 men on the field. Sorry. Yeah, so 20 minutes with 14 men on the field, and they still managed to keep Moana Pasifika, the side that scores the most points before the weekend, had scored the most points out of any side, scoreless. They kept them to 0, a donut. And that goes to show what a quality side this Brumbies side is, because they went away from home, they played their big guns, and they backed themselves in the moments when it counted. And that was really awesome to see. But conversely, it was extremely impressive to see that they got pay out of it. And that means that they know what their side is capable of, and they know what their players can do. So Stephen Larkham would have to be really happy with that. They go home now, and as I mentioned before, they play the Hurricanes. That's what the log looks like. And you see there, if they manage to get a win there, and then the Chiefs next week, where you see here who they're playing, and the Crusaders, it all of a sudden becomes a bit of a different picture heading into the last 3 games after next weekend of the season of each team, because they still have buys to play. So it's 5 more rounds, 4 more games, including next weekend. So Brumbies on a tear, and they could very well be looking at a top 2 finish if they continue going this way, but they can't take the foot off the pedal. They have to keep going. So well done to the Brumbies. Unfortunate for Moana Pasifika, but they'll come back. I know that for a fact. And the final game of the weekend was the Chiefs and the Highlanders. It was a bit of a drubbing in the end. The Highlanders really took it to the Chiefs early. They played extremely well, but then the quality and the rampant energy of the Chiefs to be able to generate phases. And the thing is, they're one of the best sides in the offload. They're one of the highest offloading sides in the competition. And so if you're not setting rucks, then you don't need to set. Sorry, that sounds kind of stupid when you say like that. But if you're not setting rucks, you're not setting rucks. So that means the players are on their feet. But nevertheless, when you're heading into a tackle, defenders are always kind of posting up, getting ready for that ruck situation. But if you're never, as an attacking side, setting up for that ruck situation, you have players in and around the ball that are able and prepared to run, but they're not necessarily forming themselves and shutting down and, going away from that expansive play. And that's what the Chiefs managed to do. They managed to find weak shoulders. They managed to get the offload. And that never allowed the Highlanders to get into their defensive pattern. And what's so crucial about this, and this would have been well researched by Jamie Joseph, by Jamie Joseph, as well as Clayton McMillan on the Chiefs side, that once the Chiefs go to a breakdown, the Highlanders conversely are one of the most dominant tackling sides in the competition. The captain Sean Withy, the flanker Lasanga, they have some of the highest. They have like 10 plus dominant tackle stats, which is ridiculous. Some sides in the competition don't have 10. I don't think don't have 10 dominant tackle stats for the year. It is an incredible stat, and they are doing it because that is part of their DNA, and that's what they're trying to do. But that dominant tackle only happens if you're able to set your defense. If you can get off the line and meet the attacker before they're ready to actually take that contact, or behind the gain line where they try to scoot around you and you're able to post up, tee off, and nail them. And so that's what the Chiefs were doing by not allowing themselves to set rucks and offload continuously. Without that, the Highlanders weren't able to tee off and create that defensive pressure. And even without that, Timothy Tavatavanawe managed to get a couple of steals. I thought that the Highlanders' back three worked really well together. Jacob Drake to Tavuki Neepkins definitely found space. Really impressive. But nonetheless, you've just got to look at how this looks in the overall context of where these two sides are sitting. It's bad news for the Highlanders. They're not out of it yet. Depending on how their run is to the finals, we'll see. But for the Chiefs, this is they're going from strength to strength, especially after that Waratahs blip, because I do believe it was a blip. That's not an indication of where the Waratahs are. That's not an indication of where the Chiefs are. But nonetheless, it was a impressive win. And to do it in Dunedin at the Zoo, you've just got to be able to give him a hand and just say well done, because 46-10 against a really strong Highlanders side this year is impressive. But there you go. That's the round wrap. Tomorrow I will be releasing a power ranking, so power rankings video for the 2/3 that have gone for this season. So keep your eye out for that, and enjoy your weekend that's left. Enjoy your Easter weekend. Happy Easter, and I will catch you on the next video.